Here we are with Channel 17 Stump the Chumps program with Burlington area trivia, questions, and answers. Our fun time to share with you when we go back in the day when milk was 19 cents a quart and pot. And well, that pot was a container in which you grew flowers.
Outside of my comfort zone. And
well, today we have our co-host, retiring state representative Joey Donovan, and our special guest, Thea Lewis. Welcome, Thea.
Hi there.
And Bill, I'm not retired yet. Don't say that about me. I'm still working every day for my constituents on Zoom.
Yes.
But my video's not working, so you're just going to be able to hear my voice today.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
It's nice to see you too.
And I had a ball checking you out and sort of went on a virtual scared, spooky walk with you.
Oh, okay, great. Did you check out the Scared in Vermont?
Yes, it was great.
Terrific. I'm glad you liked it.
Anyway, Joey, the word was retiring, in all due respect. But first, we're all in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis, which is spanning the world. So in the safety of everyone, Thea, Joey, and I are sharing this time with you from home using Zoom. Joey, what is your experience using Zoom in the legislature?
Well, ever since the middle of March, on a daily basis, we've been meeting. I had a committee meeting at 8:30 this morning. At 10 o'clock, we were on till 3 o'clock debating a number of bills. And it's challenging for all of us, I think.
Well, do you miss the personal relationship?
Very much so. Very much so.
Do you think that makes a big difference in your discussions?
I think it does for everyone. And I think there's just a lot lost. But I think people are doing well. And as I said, we passed the new voting bill today, vote by mail, had a very healthy debate on that. And it went on for several hours. And that was one of 3 or 4 very important bills we passed today.
Okay.
So,
and when you do Zoom, does anybody show up in pajamas at 8:30 in the morning?
I'm quite sure they do, and probably with less than pajamas.
Oh, that should be interesting. Anyway, to get back to what's going on, I'm your co-host, Bill Keogh, born, brought up, and schooled in the Burlington area, and served some time in the political arena. Joey, what are your credentials?
Well, very similar to yours, Bill, except of course I'm decades younger. I too grew up here and went to local schools and moved to Boston after college and lived there for a while and acquired a husband there and then came back. I love this city. We're very lucky.
Thea, you've been around Burlington and brought up and schooled in the Burlington area. And you've written some books about the city and you do the annual Ghost Walk. Tell us about your Burlington roots.
Well, I was born in Burlington and my stepdad worked for the Lear Corporation. They were under contract during the Vietnam War to McDonnell Douglas. So we traveled a little bit, but we did come back. I attended Burlington High School and attended UVM for a while. And some people locally know me as a person who worked in creative services at WCAX TV for about 23 years. But yeah, I have been the chief cook and bottle washer of Queen City Ghost Walk since 2002.
Now, have you written a book about cemeteries in the Burlington area?
I have. That's my new book. It's called Lakeview Cemetery of Burlington, Vermont, and it's a book that is really dear to my heart because we do some tours in Lakeview Cemetery, which is a wonderful old lawn park cemetery.
So ghost tours.
So we do the tours are I'd say they're a little bit different flavor than the haunted tours we do in downtown Burlington because what we're doing is walking along the cemetery paths and we're connecting with stones that are there and telling the stories of the people who are buried there and then telling how they're connected to the ghost stories we have in town. So it's been a lot of fun doing that and it's just a beautiful cemetery. I recommend to any of your viewers, if you have not gotten up early on a Saturday or Sunday morning, or these days, people who are working from home or have different schedules. I love to get up early in the morning and take a cup of coffee and just stroll through Lakeview. It's got that beautiful overlook out to Lake Champlain, and it's really a wonderful and special place.
Well, what about the chapel there? The chapel seems very intriguing to me.
Oh yeah, the Louisa Howard Chapel is so great, and of course, it would not still exist probably, this beautiful Gothic chapel, if it were not for the Friends of the Louisa Howard Chapel. There was a period of time when the chapel had fallen into such despair, the city was thinking of turning it into city offices. It was being used as coffin storage, and fortunately, one of the people who was having a relative interred looked at the chapel as she was making the arrangements and said, "Gosh, this is a beautiful place and it should be a resource." And people banded together, a community banded together and restored that wonderful chapel that was first donated by a philanthropist in Burlington named Louisa Howard back in the 1800s.
Are there any ceremonies there?
There are ceremonies there now. The chapel is, you can go on, a lot of people might not know that the cemeteries fall under the umbrella of Burlington's Parks and Recreation Department. So you can go to the Parks and Recreation page or the Lakeview Cemetery page, and you can see all of the different ways that you might utilize that beautiful resource, that beautiful chapel. It's small, holds about 50 people, but it can be rented for appropriate activities, and it's just it's beautiful surroundings on beautiful. The chapel itself is great. The land it's on is beautiful and well kept by the cemetery department. So I recommend it.
Yeah, where did you research some of the names from the graves there? Did you go to special collections, or what did you use for resource?
I've spent some time at UVM's Special Collections Library, but I also have, I had the good luck, there was a gentleman who lived in Burlington, since passed, and his name was Leo Fleury. And
Oh, God, yes.
yeah.
Tom's father, right?
Tom's dad. And
Yeah.
so Leo was very much into historic preservation, and he loaned me these 3 wonderful books, and it's Historic Guide to Burlington Neighborhoods 1, 2, and 3. And they were created with a grant from the Historic Preservation Society. Right. And they're just incredible resources. If people can, out of print, but if people can get their hands on those, it's actually how I started my very first ghost walk. Leo was told that I was going to do a haunted history tour in Burlington back in 2001. And he said, "Have Thea come to my house to pick up this book." And so he gave me the first one, and my husband has since managed to grab the others for me. And I can't tell you how many times I go back to those books to look and kind of get myself straight as to what happened where and who it was who was involved.
Oh, that's great.
So, all right, Thea, let me go. By the way, folks, if you want to call in 862-3966, you can ask a question of Thea, of Joey, or me, or have a comment or share an experience. That's the same old telephone number, 862-3966, and we'll get you on the air. Going back to your television experience, Thea, what does the WCAX, what do those 3 call letters mean?
Well, it's the College of Agriculture Extension, and it was a WCAX. It was actually, before it was a television station, was a radio station, and the radio station was actually owned by one of the gentlemen who is buried at Lakeview Cemetery.
Who's that?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to stump you. Can you give me the name of the gentleman who made the first cross-country automobile trek?
Oh, yes.
He was a
Yes.
Henry Jackson.
Yes.
It was Horatio Nelson Jackson, and he was he owned a newspaper in town and a radio station. And then Stuart Martin's stepfather purchased that radio station, and now we've got WCAX as just a wonderful wonderful history to that station. Of course, now it's owned by Gray Television, but when I worked there, it was owned by the Martin family, and it really was like a big family.
Yeah.
You don't stay in a place for 23 years unless you feel some loyalty to the place and the way things are done. So I had a great time.
And so many of those people really became part of families. You think of Tony Adams.
Oh, sure. Tony Adams, Lynn Jarvis, who produced
Mick Gallagher. Was it
Mickey
Gallagher?
Gallagher. Yeah, I heard my very first season at WCAX, I set something down in the studio where it didn't belong. And I was told a great story about how once in the summer before the studio was air conditioned, Mickey Gallagher had gone in to the news set and he hadn't set something down on his script before they went on the air, and somebody turned the fan toward him, and all the pages of his script went flying all over the place, and he wasn't very happy. So I tried to make sure while I was there that if I was in the studio, I was putting things exactly where they belonged.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, when I got out of the service, I went to work for WCAX Radio. I worked for J.A. Sullivan. I used to do some of the news at the radio station. And then I went to Barrett Street to work at the television end of the program and worked with Tony Adams. Now I've got a really tough question for you. Tough question.
Okay.
When Mount Mansfield Television was granted a license, what were the call letters of Mount Mansfield Television?
Oh my gosh. You really are stumping me, because right here at this moment, I can't think of it, but I created the 40th and 50th anniversary shows, one with the help of Will Michael, and then the other with the help of a videographer editor named Eric Goodrich. And it's terrible. I don't remember that right now.
That's a tough question. That's what I said. It's listener, viewers, do you know what those call letters are? Call us in, 862-3966. I'm not going to give you the answer for now. Now, tell us more about these ghost walks.
Oh, sure. Well, the ghost walk started, I did my very first ghost walk in 2002 after about a year of research. And
so did you find there's really ghosts in Burlington?
Oh, yeah, there are lots of ghosts in Burlington. Burlington has got a great haunted history because it's got a really wonderful history. I mean, we've got Timothy Follett, who was the first owner of the Follett House, which a lot of viewers might know as the Pomerleau Real Estate Building, a beautiful mansion that sits up on the hill there and looks over Lake Champlain. I love to think of Timothy Follett there on the balcony of his home, kind of looking out. He was sort of the king of all he surveyed. He brought the railroad to the city of Burlington. He owned a store on Burlington's waterfront. He was the very first president of the very first Merchants Bank in the state of Vermont. So he could stand up there on his balcony with an unobscured view and look at Lake Champlain and just think about everything he had a hand in. His house is very haunted. We've talked to people at the Pomerleau Real Estate Agency who, from the gentleman who takes care of the actual physical plant and does other work for the Pomerleau family, to Tony Pomerleau himself, who would swear that Timothy Follett's wife, Lorraine, was responsible for playing with the lights, turning them on and off when nobody was there to...
Oh, come on.
No, it's wonderful. It's a fantastic story. And I feel like anytime I pulled into that parking lot, because the family was kind enough to let us park in their parking lot when we would do our tours, because I would end up there. Their house was always is still the second to last spot on the tour. Wow. If I saw Antonio Pomerleau, a wonderful man, in the parking lot, he usually had one more ghost story to tell me. We brought a tour of about 25 students from Mount Mansfield High School on a daytime tour, and we were on the College Street side, what would have been the formal entrance of the house. And the kids were peering through the windows when all of a sudden the door was swept open, and there was Mr. Pomerleau. And he beckoned the kids in. He asked them if they wanted a tour of the place. He let them kind of have the run of the place up and down, all the way up to the cupola. And then when they came downstairs, he took selfies with them. And he joked with one of the kids that aside from the house, he was the oldest thing there. So he was just a wonderful benefactor. I mean, he and his son Ernie have let us traipse across their lawn with groups of people, sometimes 55, 60 people every fall.
Yeah, they've done a good job preserving that house, and it's a really a nice place in downtown Burlington, which is has a lot of buildings and a lot going on, but
Yeah.
they've done a great job on that. Yeah.
Well, Bill,
Now,
you probably remember that, when urban renewal reared its head in Burlington, there were people who thought that building should be torn down.
oh,
Oh,
I
Yeah,
know. Yep.
what a terrible thing that
yeah.
would have been.
Yeah. Now, have you ever heard of some ghost in the? I heard a story. Someone told me the other day about a ghost under the bridge at Lakeside Avenue. You know the railroad bridge, and then it goes under. Somebody told me about a ghost of some young woman who was killed by a railroad car, a railroad train, and
That's right.
and,
Well,
and
Joey
is
might know
that is
something.
that true? Is that true?
It is true. If Joey watched the right video for Scared in Vermont, she might know something about this story too. There was a young woman who worked at the Queen City Cotton Company, and she and her sister and a friend were making their way back to their evening shift. They had had their supper in their little apartment in the Lakeside neighborhood, and as they were getting ready to cross the tracks, they were wet. A storm had just come across the lake. It was late June, one of those storms that just rears its head suddenly, it seems, in the humidity. And she slipped and didn't make it across the tracks. The train was coming, the Rutland and Burlington, and it hit her. And after that, people claimed to see Marie Blais in the cotton company and in the little neighborhood where she'd lived. And even the engineer of the train, it's reported that he quit his job because every time he would get to that spot in the railroad tracks, he would see at first an obstacle there. It might look like a big trunk in the way, or it might look like a boulder, and he would slow down for it. And then as he slowed down, he would see the face of Marie Blais by the side of the railroad tracks. He said it was like hitting her over and over again.
Oh, dear.
Yes.
And Thea, it was her death that caused the city to develop and create the underpass there. Is that?
Yeah, they talked with the city and the railroad company, got together and said, because what was happening was people who lived in the neighborhood were suddenly being fearful of crossing the railroad tracks. And of course, while there were some things, there were some stores and things they could take advantage of in the neighborhood, a lot of people had to go to work elsewhere. The kids had to go to school elsewhere, and people were just very concerned that they might be hit by a train.
Do you remember the year that happened?
It was around 1901. I'd have to go back and look I have so many dates in my head.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I have a lot of dates in my head, but there are, if anybody who has access to the old Burlington Free Press online, you can certainly find the report that the conductor made, that the night watchman made inside the mill. He said that after everyone would leave, because they had a couple of shifts that were over, late in the late evening hours, he said that he would hear the sound of a machine starting up again, and he would go into that room where she'd worked and see Marie Blais at her loom. So
Wow.
yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing.
What's the most vivid ghost story of all the ones that you've delved into, the ones that are believable?
So we have a call on the line too.
What's that?
So we have a caller on the line, Bill.
Oh, that's wonderful. We have a
Okay.
caller on the line. Should we take care of the caller, Bill, and then I'll let you know?
Let's do that. Caller,
Okay.
you're on the air.
Go ahead, caller.
Hi, this is Barry, and I'm calling from Huntington. I know that the Burlington area has a lot of, notable people that have been in our history, and I'm just wondering if there is a particular person, or I guess ghost, that you would want or most like to see from Burlington or Vermont's history.
Okay,
Question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. It's so hard for me. Okay, I have a couple of favorites. And I hope no one will think that I'm being disrespectful when I reveal that the first one is Brevet Major General William Wells. If you look at the statue at Battery Park, you'll see a depiction of him as a gentleman in his middle years. And the statue was actually created from a portrait, and there's an identical statue to that one on the battlefield at Gettysburg. But before he was before he was a general, before he was Major General William Wells was what I would call a Civil War hottie. He was, and not only was he a handsome, somebody on my Queen City Ghost Walk page said he looked pretty modern. Like he had that Smith Brothers cough drops beard, and he looked like one of the guys you might see in a flannel shirt coming out of the other place on Winooski Avenue.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing Bill Keogh.
Oh, well, there you go, with the beard. But William Wells was not just a handsome young man. He was a brilliant man, and he was just one of the most. I think that he might have been the most decorated soldier from Vermont in the Civil War. And the other character from Burlington's history, oh, it's so hard to choose. I really love them all. It's a tie between Timothy Follett, who I think was just a huge mover and shaker in his time and had a tragic end to his life. But I also really love the story of John J. Flynn, who built the Flynn Theater. And he started his life in southern Vermont as a farm boy, came to Vermont as a young teenager, worked on a local farm on the outskirts of Burlington, and then saved his money and leased that farm, and then started a grocery business. And from that, all of these other things came springing to life. He was a man who never had children. He and his wife did not have children, but he was a huge philanthropist in town who donated to children's causes and threw a big party every New Year's Day for the messenger and delivery boys and girls in the area.
You all set, caller? Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking. I love them all.
I'll get back to the answer to the question of the license to Mount Mansfield Television. The call letters were WMVT.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Thank you. Bill. I remember that.
Like Montpelier, Vermont. That's where the license was
Sure.
granted. And then they moved it to Burlington. Okay, the caller had a good question. I think my question was, what's your most significant ghost story that's most believable?
Well, I find it quite believable. Now, there are a lot of people who are naysayers and who everybody has a different belief system. I cannot fault anybody for that. A lot of people will say to me, do you really believe the stories you tell? And of course I do. I couldn't do what I do. I could not do what I do if I didn't. I had a gentleman who was a tour guide in Boston come on our tour last year or the year before, and he said in front of a group of about 25 people at Battery Park that his tour company in Boston had taken him from doing straight history tours to ghost tours, and he just started making everything up. And I said, this is a guy who would never work for me. But I really love the story of the American Flatbread Company ghosts. I say ghosts because I believe there are more than one. And of course, a lot of people know the American Flatbread Company as a place that was called Carber's Restaurant.
Yep.
And so the rumors and stories about that building and that area go back many years, but were sort of brought to the surface when the restaurant was Carber's. I'd have people tell me stories about working in there and having things get moved around, hearing voices,
really
strange things happening in the restrooms, things happening in the basement. And my favorite story is the story of a bartender who was at the end of a shift, a very busy night. They had been shorthanded. She let everybody else go, and she finished counting the cash to make a bank deposit. And as she was turned away from the bar, she heard a strange sound behind her, this kind of tinkling sound, like someone running their hands underneath a chandelier. And when she whipped around to look and see who was, kind of having it over on her, she thought someone was teasing her. She saw that all of the glasses she'd just finished washing from her shift were stacked on the bar in a big pyramid about 3 feet high.
Oh.
Yeah. So
wow.
that story usually, it's a story that it's a location that I was foolish enough, after I'd been doing ghost tours for maybe 6 years, I said, I'm going to change things up and I'm going to throw in some more stories and take out the Carber's story. And when I did, I actually got mail admonishing me that I needed to put it back on because people were told their visiting relatives or friends are going to hear this great story. So
what about the ghost of Converse Hall at UVM?
We, we haven't done UVM tours except bus tours in a while, just because of all the construction that's been going on. But that is a favorite place. The story of Henry, who was it's told that he was a medical student years ago, who unfortunately took his own life. And I believe fully that from all of the different ghost stories that I've compiled from that place, that Henry is not the only ghost there at Converse. And if you look at that building, if there's any building in Burlington that is due a ghost, that building is overdue. It's a great building.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic. Just looking at that building, and now that it's been restored, it's even better.
Right.
Last year we did our Queen City Ghost Walk bus tours, and took people right up to the side of the building so we could get out and tell some stories from that lovely place, and it was a lot of fun.
Okay, so you went to Burlington High School, and you were quite responsive about. You had a favorite teacher there.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yes.
Who was that?
I loved. I've always loved English and literature, and I loved Margaret OBrien, who was this wonderful. She was, and she's maybe all of 5'1".
Yeah.
She was maybe all of 5'1", but she was mighty, and she was a force to be reckoned with. And she was responsible, I think, for me realizing some of the things I loved early on. I loved writing and I loved acting. And she was, of course, in charge of all of the kids who were involved in drama club and the plays. And she was my favorite at Burlington High School.
So Joey, is that a name that's familiar with you?
I think her father was Senator Jack OBrien.
I wondered about
Oh, wonderful.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
And I can remember her too. I haven't thought of her in years, but I didn't know her well. But you described her as, I think of her as just a small little dynamo of a woman.
She was really wonderful, and she knew how to get the most out of her students.
Yes.
And she really, she didn't push unless she had to, but you knew when she meant business. And I think that I've got a handful of teachers that I recall who really were mentors, and she's one of those.
Yeah.
Folks, we're just about out of time for the
Oh.
show, so you might want to wrap up.
Okay.
We're off
Well,
the air.
Thea, why don't you talk about how people could connect with you? Do you do anything during the summer, or do you wait till the fall?
we
generally
got
do have tours in the summer. We're holding off a little bit this year, just trying to figure out
Yeah.
what's going on with all of the COVID-19 stuff. But if people go to our Queen City Ghost Walk Facebook page, we usually release any information about when we're starting up there first. And we're still kind of plotting things out. So our website has not been updated from last year. We're kind of holding off a little bit, trying to see exactly what it is we're going to offer. We want to make sure we keep people safe.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your Thea. You've been great. Joey, you've been great. We got to wrap up. Thanks
Thank
for viewing Stump the Chumps.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Nice seeing you, Thea.
Good
See you
seeing
next
you.
time.
And
See
you
you.
too, Bill.
Bye.